I met her when I was 68. She walked into my life like a summer breeze through a window left open too long. Her name was Elise, and she was 35, vibrant, magnetic, and full of energy I hadn't felt in decades. After my first wife passed, I never thought I'd marry again. But Elise made me believe in second chances. Or so I thought. I was a retired contractor. Built my own house. Paid my taxes. I wasn't flashy, but I had security, land, a steady pension, and a heart big enough to believe someone might love me again for who I was, not for what I had. David, my son from my first marriage, was 32. Cold. Reserved. We had our issues. He blamed me for a lot, mainly the divorce from his mother, even though she left. But I still paid for his college, his first car, even bailed him out when he got into trouble with a business deal gone bad. I loved him, even if I didn't always like him. When he met Elise, he was polite, almost too polite. I noticed it, but I ignored it. The first year of marriage felt like a dream. Elise made breakfast every morning. She laughed at my jokes. She even planted flowers around the mailbox, saying the house needed some life. I fell for her, deeper than I expected. Then came the illness. Subtle at first, fatigue, dizziness. I brushed it off as age. But after I collapsed in the garden one morning, the doctors found something serious. Something I might not walk away from. Elise was perfect. Too perfect. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply took charge. She told the doctors to speak to her. She filled my prescriptions, scheduled appointments, even handled the insurance paperwork. That's when she suggested I update my life insurance. Said it was just in case. Said it would make things easier. I signed the papers. I made her sole beneficiary. And maybe that's when the switch flipped. As the weeks passed, I started noticing things. Elise wasn't as attentive. She'd leave the room when David visited. Once, I walked into the kitchen and they went silent, like kids caught passing notes in class. I started taking pills at night to help me sleep. One evening, I woke up around midnight and found Elise's side of the bed empty. I walked out to the hallway and heard murmurs downstairs. When I peeked around the corner, I saw them, Elise and David, sitting too close on the living room couch. She was in her robe. His hand was on her knee. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. Instead, I quietly returned to bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun rose. The next morning, Elise kissed me on the forehead and made me oatmeal, like nothing had happened. I ate in silence, every bite tasting like dust. Something was wrong. Something deep. But I needed proof. I called my old friend Marcus. We served in the army together. Now he ran a security company. I asked him for discreet help, no questions. Within a week, I had 2 cameras installed, one in the living room lamp, one in the hallway smoke detector. I played dumb. Let Elise continue her charade. Let David drop by unannounced. I even left town for a night, claiming a doctor's appointment across the state. But I never left. I parked a few blocks away and watched the footage live on my phone. And what I saw? Elise opened a bottle of wine. David arrived 10 minutes later. They kissed. Not a peck. Not friendly. Long familiar. She whispered something, and they laughed. Then she said, "He's getting weaker every day. It won't be long now." David replied, "Once it happens, we lay low for a bit. Then it's ours." I turned off the phone. Sat there in silence. In the dark. They weren't just cheating. They were planning my death. I wanted to rush back. I wanted to scream. But instead, I smiled. Not because I was okay. Not because I wasn't hurting. I smiled because I saw what they didn't. They thought I was old. Weak. Dying. They forgot I was a builder. A planner. A survivor. I walked into the house the next morning like nothing happened. Elise greeted me with a warm smile. David nodded, respectful. I nodded back and said, "You know what? I think I'll change my will today." Elise blinked. "Really?" "Yeah," I said. "It just feels like the right time." She smiled. And so did I. But my smile was for something else. Because the game had just begun. It's funny how pretending to be weak gives you the most power. After I saw them on that couch, whispering about my death like it was a casual chore, I felt something inside me shift. The fear was still there, yes, but something darker took root, cold, focused clarity. If they wanted a show, I'd give them a performance they'd never forget. The morning after my fake out-of-town trip, I called Elise into the kitchen while she was making coffee. "Elise," I said, voice gravelly from a night without sleep, "I want to make sure everything's in order, in case I don't get better." She turned with that same sweet smile I once believed was love. "Of course, honey. I'm here for whatever you need." I handed her a notepad where I'd scribbled names. "I want to change my will. Just to make things clearer. For David too." Her eyes sparkled. "That's smart. Responsible." She had no idea I'd already rewritten everything a week ago. David and Elise were now completely excluded. Every penny would go to a veterans hospital and 2 charities I supported for decades. I also gave copies to my lawyer and Marcus, my old army buddy. Elise and David would get nothing. That evening, I pretended to struggle with my balance. I fumbled the remote. Missed my mouth with a spoon. Elise acted attentive, even scolded David for not being helpful enough. It was theater, and I was the lead actor. David began visiting more often. Too often. They thought I was fading. One night, I left the bedroom early, saying I couldn't sleep. I heard whispers again in the kitchen. "You think he's gonna croak soon?" David said, biting into an apple. "He's barely moving now." "He's slowing down," Elise said. "It's working. You saw the insurance paperwork, right? Once it's done, we lay low. No need for drama." I walked in mid-sentence, dragging my slippers like some half-dead old man. "You two up late?" I said with a weak smile. David froze. Elise stepped forward. "We were just talking about you, hoping you'd get better." I nodded. "Appreciate that." I coughed, a fake, deep, violent cough, and they jumped like rabbits. I kept coughing until I reached the sink, then gripped the edge like I was about to collapse. Elise was by my side in an instant, hand on my back. David just stared, probably wondering how many days were left until I signed off on their future. That night, I adjusted the cameras. I added audio recorders in 2 more rooms, including the bathroom fan. David spent too much time in there, whispering on the phone. The next few days gave me hours of footage. Every lie, every plan, every disgusting moment of betrayal. They even had a timeline: wait until my birthday, then help things along. The worst part wasn't that they were cheating. It wasn't even the murder plot. It was how casual they were. How they laughed. How they mocked me. "He still thinks I'm his sweet little nurse," Elise said once. "He holds my hand like I'm his angel." David laughed. "He's got no clue. Man's just counting down without knowing the clock's rigged." They weren't just planning to kill me. They were enjoying the game. But the thing about games? They end. I needed one more move, one more lie, to set the final trap. So I told Elise my doctor had called. He said the cancer might have spread to my lungs. I lied. She put on her best concerned wife face. Oh no, do you need another appointment? I shook my head. No use now. He said I should enjoy what time I have. She hugged me. A fake, rehearsed hug. She whispered, I'll take care of everything. I smiled. That night, I faked another collapse. I staged the whole scene, blood capsule in the sink, unsteady voice calling out, then falling silent. Elise screamed. David rushed in. They called the ambulance. By the time paramedics arrived, I was unconscious. Or at least they thought I was. At the hospital, I had Marcus waiting. He'd pulled strings with an old contact. We arranged a private room, and told the staff I wanted no visitors for the first 48 hours. Elise and David were told I was in critical care and couldn't be disturbed. They believed it. What they didn't know was that I was resting, eating, planning. I had a burner phone Marcus brought. I watched the footage they didn't know still recorded. They were celebrating at home. Drinking wine. Laughing. Discussing vacation destinations once the money hit. 2 days later, I sent them both a text, from my own number. You think I didn't know? Elise called immediately. I didn't answer. Then I sent a second text. You should have checked the camera in the vent. David's response was simple, what do you want? I didn't reply. I had all I needed. The message shook them. I could tell by the silence that followed. No calls. No texts. No rushed visits to the hospital pretending to care. They vanished like roaches when the light comes on. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By the third day, I discharged myself from the hospital. Marcus picked me up in a nondescript sedan. I didn't go home. I went to a cabin we'd used years ago during hunting season, isolated, with no neighbors for miles. I needed space. I needed time. And most of all, I needed to make them sweat. That night, I reviewed the footage again. I made copies, backed everything up onto multiple drives, one of which I sent by courier to my lawyer with instructions, if anything happens to me, release the content publicly, including to local news outlets. Elise once told me, "You're so trusting." It's kind of sweet. I used to think that was a compliment. Now I understood it was a warning. For a week, I stayed off the radar. I sent them nothing. I wanted them to wonder. To panic. And they did. On the 8th day, Elise showed up at the house. Marcus was monitoring the camera feeds remotely. He called me. She's tearing the place apart. Probably looking for the vent camera you mentioned. I smiled. Let her look. She stayed for hours. She opened drawers, lifted couch cushions, even crawled into the attic. She never found the real cameras, because there were none left. I'd already pulled them out. She was searching for ghosts. David came the next evening. He wasn't as quiet. He smashed the living room mirror, flipped chairs, and yelled into the empty house, "You're dead, old man. You're already dead." He was cracking. Perfect. I sent my next message the following morning. A video clip. Just 30 seconds long. It showed David and Elise kissing in the kitchen, while I, in the background, accidentally dropped a glass, only they didn't notice. The message attached, "I saw everything. You were never careful." Within 10 minutes, David responded, "We need to talk." I waited 4 hours. Then I replied, "Meet me alone. Tomorrow. 10 p.m. A fishing cabin." The next day felt eternal. I arrived at the cabin early. Set up cameras. Not hidden this time, visible. Obvious. I wanted him to know he was being watched. At exactly 10, David's car pulled up. He stepped out, dressed in all black like some budget assassin. He looked around nervously before walking up the porch. I opened the door. Didn't say a word. Just stared at him. "Dad," he said, "can we just talk?" I nodded slowly. "Talk." He stepped inside, looked at the cameras. "What is this? Some kind of setup?" "It's insurance," I said, walking past him into the kitchen. "Have a seat." He sat, but he didn't look comfortable. He fidgeted, eyes darting. "I know everything," I said calmly. "From the first kiss to the last text. From the insurance talk to the jokes about my funeral. All of it." He swallowed hard. "It wasn't like that. Don't insult me." He went silent. "You think you're smart, David?" I asked. "You think I raised a man who conspires to murder his father for money?" He looked down. "It got out of hand." Elise said. "Elise said what?" "That you'd be gone soon anyway." I laughed once. Cold. Bitter. "So it was mercy? Is that what you tell yourself?" He stood up. "I didn't come here to be lectured." I stood too, but slower. "No, you came here because you're scared. Because now you're wondering how much I've told the world." He clenched his fists. "So what now? You gonna send us to jail? Ruin everything?" I leaned in. "I don't have to ruin your life, David. You already did that yourself." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out. I didn't follow. The next morning, Elise called me. First time since the messages began. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "can we meet? I just want to talk." I considered it for a long second. "Fine," I said. "Tomorrow. Noon. The park near the lake. Come alone." I hung up before she could respond. Marcus met me later that night with more equipment. This time, I wasn't just recording. I was preparing a show. The lake was still that morning. Not a ripple on its surface, like glass under a soft gray sky. The kind of quiet that would calm most people. But not me. Not today. I sat on a bench beneath an old willow tree, facing the water, my eyes fixed on the spot where Elise said she'd meet me. Noon sharp. She was already 5 minutes late. Typical. But I didn't mind. The camera in the button of my jacket was rolling. My phone, connected to a hidden microphone on the underside of the bench, was recording everything. Marcus was parked in a truck across the park, out of sight, but close enough. Just in case. At 12:10, she appeared. Elise wore all white, like a saint, or maybe like a widow. Hair pulled back, sunglasses too big for her face. She moved slowly, like she was nervous. I liked that. She approached and sat down without a word. For a while, we just sat. The silence between us was colder than the wind coming off the water. Then she spoke. "You look better than I expected." I didn't respond. She sighed. "Look, I didn't come here to fight." "Then why did you come?" I asked, eyes still on the lake. She paused, as if forming the lie in her mind. "Because I care about you. Because things got out of control." I turned to her slowly. "Out of control? You were planning my funeral like it was a weekend getaway. That's not fair." "Fair?" I snapped. "You want to talk about fair? You married me, pretended to love me, slept in my bed while sleeping with my son, and smiled at me while planning my death." Her mouth tightened. "You don't understand what it was like. Make me understand, I said, leaning in. Go ahead. I'm listening. She blinked. Her hands trembled slightly. I didn't plan to fall for David, she said. It just happened. You were old, sick. He was there. We connected. Over my grave, I muttered. She ignored that. But I didn't want to hurt you. No, I said. You just wanted the money. She shook her head. At first, yes. But then I got scared. When you got sick, it stopped being about money. It became about survival. I stared at her. You thought I was going to die anyway, I said. So why not speed it up and collect your prize? She didn't deny it. I stood. This was a mistake. She reached for my arm. Wait, please. What do you want from me? That question hung in the air. I turned and looked her straight in the eye. I want you to confess. She recoiled. What? On camera. Right now. Everything. No, she said, shaking her head. I can't. You already did, I said, nodding toward the tree. Marcus is here. We've got this whole thing recorded. Your lies, your excuses, your fear. She stood too, voice rising. You set me up? I smiled. Now you understand. She looked around, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. You won't get away with this. I already have, I said. And you? You finished. She stared at me for a long moment, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to scream but had no words. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. But it was a step. Marcus met me back at the truck. She gave us enough, he said. The lawyers are gonna love this. I nodded. It's not about the law. Not really. Then what's it about? Making them live with it, I said. Knowing I know. Knowing I'm still here. That every day they look over their shoulder, wondering what's next. Marcus gave me a long look. You colder than you used to be. I had to be, I said. They made me this way. Later that night, I watched the footage again. Every frame. Every word Elise said. I edited it carefully, cutting it into segments. One for the court. One for the family. One just for me. Then I wrote a letter to David. No threats. No accusations. Just one line. I saw you. And I mailed it. Let him sweat. 3 days passed after I mailed the letter to David. I didn't hear back. No texts. No calls. No late-night visits. Just silence, beautiful, uncertain silence. I imagined him pacing his apartment, staring at the envelope, reading and rereading that single sentence, I saw you. That sentence didn't just tell him I knew. It told him I was watching, still out there, and far from done. Meanwhile, Elise tried to play the peacemaker. She called twice, left voicemails pretending to care. Please call me, I'm worried about you, she said in one. Can we just talk, she begged in another. I deleted them without a second thought. Let her stew in her fear. Marcus and I were now deep into the next phase of the plan. It wasn't enough to scare them. I wanted them exposed, publicly, permanently. That meant showing the world who they really were. I started by organizing a dinner. It would be a family reunion of sorts. I reached out to my brother, my 2 cousins, and my best friend from the army, people Elise had smiled at over the years, pretended to respect. I told them I was celebrating a milestone in my recovery. That was true, in a way. I was recovering from naivety. They all agreed to come, curious and excited. They'd always liked Elise. They had no idea what she really was. The dinner was set for Saturday evening. I had Marcus set up high-end recording equipment in the dining room, 3 hidden mics, one 4K camera tucked inside a hollowed-out bookshelf, and another in the chandelier. I wanted angles. I wanted clarity. Elise arrived first, as I expected. She wore a soft blue dress, one I bought for her last Christmas. The scent of her perfume hit me like a slap. It used to calm me. Now it made my skin crawl. "You look well," she said with that rehearsed smile. "So do you," I replied, then turned and walked away. David showed up next. His eyes scanned the room nervously. He avoided my gaze. Good. The guests arrived one by one, cheerful, joking, bringing bottles of wine and asking how I was doing. Elise played the doting wife, setting the table, complimenting everyone. David forced smiles, clinked glasses. But underneath it all, they were shaking. And I could see it. When the meal was served, I raised my glass. "Before we eat," I said, "I want to show you all something. A little tribute to life. To truth." I nodded toward Marcus, who was sitting quietly near the hallway. He picked up the remote and hit play. The screen on the wall lit up. At first, it showed a quiet kitchen, ours. Then Elise entered the frame, followed by David. They kissed. She laughed. He whispered, "He's too old to notice anything." The room went silent. My brother stared at the screen, jaw slowly falling open. My cousin covered her mouth. Elise froze, her hand gripping the edge of the table. David went pale. The next clip played, Elise standing in front of the bathroom mirror, talking to someone off camera. "It's not murder," she said. "It's mercy. He's miserable. He wants to go." The final clip, David sitting in my study, holding my insurance documents. "Once he signs the last form, it's done," he said. "We wait, we grieve, we collect." I let the silence sit like a weight on their shoulders. Then I said, calmly, "I survived. And I heard it all." Elise stood abruptly. "This is out of context." "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "This is the real context." David stood too, voice shaking. "You can't just, this isn't legal." "It's not for court," I said. "It's for them." I pointed to my guests. "The people who knew me. The people who thought you were family. My best friend, Bill, a man who'd taken bullets beside me in war, stood up slowly. I trusted you, Elise. I welcomed you. How dare you?" My cousin added, "You kissed him at my daughter's wedding. You were holding his hand while lying to his face?" The room turned on them. Elise backed up. "You all don't understand, he was dying." "He was." "I'm not dead," I said. "Not yet. And not before this came out." David looked at me then. Really looked. "So what now? You ruin our lives?" I smiled. "I don't have to. You did that yourselves." Elise left first, grabbing her purse and stumbling out the door. David followed minutes later, without saying another word. The rest of the evening was quiet. No one really touched their food. One by one, they left, hugging me gently. Telling me how sorry they were. I nodded. I didn't need their sympathy. I needed the silence that followed. That night, I sat alone in the house. No footsteps upstairs. No fake kisses. Just peace. I played the footage again, not because I needed proof, but because I needed to remind myself. I won. But it wasn't over yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear or anxiety. From clarity. I had exposed them, publicly, unmistakably. They had no way to spin it now. Not to the family. Not to the community. But still, I wasn't satisfied. See, destroying their reputation was just one part of the puzzle. The bigger piece, the one that truly mattered, was making sure they paid with more than shame. I wanted consequences. Legal, financial, personal. Everything they had planned for me, I wanted it to turn back on them, like a snake biting its own tail. The next morning, I met with my attorney, Clara. She'd known me for 15 years, handled every financial decision I'd made since retirement. When I handed her the flash drive with all the footage, she didn't even blink. "We'll start with a restraining order," she said. "Then we sue for attempted fraud and emotional abuse. I want the insurance company involved too," I added. "Make sure their names are flagged." She nodded. "I'll draft a full complaint. Give me 2 days." Marcus had already helped me close all joint accounts. Elise would find her cards declined before sundown. I'd also sold one of our vehicles, a car she used, and transferred the house deed to a trust under my sole control. She wouldn't get a cent. Not even in court. Everything she thought was hers was now gone. David was trickier. Legally, he hadn't signed anything. But his voice was all over the recordings. His fingerprints were metaphorically on every plan. More importantly, he had crossed a line that no father forgets. Betrayal like his, it doesn't wash off. Not with apologies. Not with time. I didn't want to put him in jail. That would be too clean. I wanted him ruined, but awake for every second of it. So I went after his reputation. David worked in real estate, a small firm, but growing fast. I contacted 3 of his clients anonymously, sending edited videos of him discussing my insurance. I also forwarded the clips to the head of his firm. Within 24 hours, David was suspended pending investigation. 2 clients pulled out of deals. Another left a review calling him deceptive and morally bankrupt. His name started circulating online, not viral, but visible. Elise tried to fight back. She posted a vague Facebook status. "Some people are so bitter they destroy what's left of love." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Half the comments were from family members saying things like, "Unbelievable what you did and you disgust me." She deleted it within hours. Then came the call. I was sitting on my back porch, the morning sun warming the planks beneath my feet. My phone buzzed. Elise. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "What do you want?" I said flatly. She paused. I could hear wind on her end. Maybe she was walking, or pacing. "You've made your point," she said quietly. "Have I?" "You ruined my life." "No," I corrected. "You did that the moment you decided to kill the man who trusted you." "I never wanted it to go that far." I laughed once. Sharp. Dry. "You wanted it to go just far enough to get paid." She didn't argue. Smart woman, at least in that moment. "What now?" she asked. "Are you going to keep dragging this out?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "Now I give you something you never gave me." "What's that?" "A second chance." She scoffed. "You think this is mercy?" "No," I said. "It's a sentence. You get to live with this. Every job interview. Every date. Every family event. Every time you hear my name, you'll remember what you did. And so will everyone else." She hung up without another word. That night, Marcus and I burned the last of the printed photos, the ones Elise thought I never saw. Her and David, half-dressed in my house, my chair, my kitchen. I didn't need them anymore. The world knew the truth now. As the flames ate away at the edges, Marcus looked over at me. "You good?" I stared at the fire. "I will be." Because now, the house was clean. The name was cleared. And the reckoning had only just begun. 2 weeks had passed since the dinner. 2 weeks since Elise ran from my house like it was on fire, and David stormed off like a cornered animal. 2 weeks since I let the world see who they really were. But now came the part that would really hurt them. My lawyer, Clara, had filed everything. Elise had been served. Fraud. Manipulation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. She tried to claim the insurance policy, but when the company saw the evidence, they launched their own investigation. It was slow, methodical, but inevitable. Her name would be on a blacklist. No more big payouts for sudden accidents. David, on the other hand, had more immediate problems. His brokerage dropped him after the leaked recordings made local headlines. Turns out, people don't want to buy homes from a man who plotted to profit off his own father's death. He tried to fight it, claimed the videos were fake. Deepfakes, he said. But when we provided the raw files to a digital forensics expert, that lie died fast. He called me once. Just once. I answered. "What do you want?" I asked. "You destroyed my life," he said. "No," I replied. "You did that the moment you chose her over me." There was silence. Then he asked, "What happens now?" I didn't answer. I just hung up. Later that week, I got a visit from someone I didn't expect, David's ex-wife, Karen. She showed up at my front door holding a small box. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hadn't seen her in years. Not since the divorce. She looked tired, older, but still strong in that quiet way I always admired. I let her in. We sat in the living room, and she placed the box on the table. "These were your things," she said. "David had them at our old house. I figured you'd want them back." Inside were letters. Photos. Even a pocket knife I gave David when he was 12. Things I thought were lost. She didn't ask about Elise. Didn't need to. "I saw the videos," she said softly. "Everyone has." "I didn't do it for revenge," I told her. "Not at first." "I know," she said. "You did it because it was right." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For what he became." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch and stared at the stars. They looked the same as they did when Elise first moved in. When I believed love had found me again. How strange that the sky never changes, even when everything else does. The next day, I received an email from Clara. She'd received confirmation Elise had been formally removed from the insurance policy. The company was also building a fraud case against her. There would be no payout. No reward for betrayal. I forwarded the confirmation to an old friend of mine at the local paper. Not for the headline, but for the record. Truth deserves a witness. By the end of the week, the town knew everything. And then something strange happened. I started receiving letters. Dozens. Some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends. Neighbors. Even strangers. Men and women who had experienced betrayal. Who had watched my story and saw themselves in it. They thanked me. Called me brave. Said they felt seen. I wasn't looking for sympathy. But I read every single one. Then came the letter that stopped me cold. It was postmarked 2 towns over. No return address. Just a plain white envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. You think you've won. But you only made me smarter. No name. No signature. But I knew that handwriting. It was Elise. I sat for a long time with that letter in my hand. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just smiled. She was trying to scare me. But the thing about people like Elise? They don't know when they've already lost. I handed the letter to Marcus and told him to scan it, log it, and store it with the rest. And then, I called Clara. I want to update my will, I said. She laughed softly. Again? Yes, I said. But this time, I'm adding someone. Who? David's daughter. My granddaughter. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since she left for college. But I remembered how she used to sit on my lap, ask for stories, ask about tools, about how to build things. She was the only innocent one in this mess. And I wanted her to know that her grandfather didn't die a fool. Weeks passed. The days grew colder. Leaves fell from the trees around my house in slow, spiraling drops, like reminders that everything, even betrayal, decays eventually. But while nature prepared for winter, I was preparing for something far more permanent. By now, Elise was a ghost in the town. Her friends dropped her. Her gym membership was cancelled. I heard through the grapevine she was living in a cheap apartment near the freeway, working part-time at a florist's shop. Her days of wine and dresses were over. David, on the other hand, had vanished completely. After being fired from his firm and exposed online, he went off the grid. I hadn't heard from him in a month. And I didn't care. He'd made his choices. His silence wasn't peace. It was avoidance. Cowardice. I spent those weeks restoring an old woodshop behind my house. It had been my sanctuary years ago, where I built furniture, carved toys for David when he was a boy. Now, it became my therapy room. The smell of cedar, the hum of a sander, the weight of a hammer, it all reminded me who I was before all this. Before Elise and David turned my world into a stage for their lies. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter. Hand-delivered. No postage. It was from my granddaughter, Sarah. Grandpa, it began, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I didn't know what my father was doing. I didn't know about Elise. I found out from a friend who showed me the news. I cried for days. I don't know what to say, except that I'm so sorry. And I still love you. I read that letter 3 times before I even moved. The words hit like a hammer, but not in a painful way. In a way that broke through something. I folded it carefully and placed it in my drawer, right next to my updated will. She was worth it. Worth fighting for. Worth protecting. I called her that evening. She picked up on the second ring. Grandpa? Her voice cracked. It's me, I said. Then we didn't talk for almost 30 seconds. Just silence. Just breathing. Finally, she said, I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for, I said. You didn't do this. He did. I want to see you. I smiled. Come this weekend. I'll make French toast. Just like when you were 10. That weekend, she came. She was older, of course, 22 now, studying psychology, but she still had that same spark in her eyes. We talked for hours. She asked questions. Hard ones. About the videos. About Elise. About what I felt. I felt stupid, I told her. But mostly, I felt angry. Not because they betrayed me. But because I let them get so close. She nodded. You let them in because you're kind. That's not a weakness. She was right. And I needed to hear it. Later that night, I showed her the shop. She picked up a small wooden bird I'd carved when she was little. I still have the one you made me in 6th grade, she said. The one with the wings that flap when you pull the string. I smiled. Took me a week to figure out that mechanism. She placed it back on the shelf and looked at me. Are you okay now? I think I'm getting there. She stayed the night in the guest room. The house felt full again. Not like it used to with Eliza's fake laughter and David's forced politeness. This was real. This was healing. But life has a way of twisting even the calmest moments. The next morning, while I was making coffee, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and found a man I didn't recognize. Tall, bald, wearing a gray suit. His eyes were cold. Are you Mr. Harold Bennett? He asked. Yes. He handed me a document. You've been served. I took the paper. Legal language. Lawsuit. Defamation. Filed by David. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Tell him I look forward to court, I said. The man didn't smile. Just turned and walked away. I closed the door and returned to the kitchen. Sarah looked up. Everything okay? I held up the paper. Looks like David wants a second round. She frowned. What does he think he's going to get? Nothing, I said. But let him try. Because here's the thing about men like David, they can't stand losing. They'll keep coming back, thinking they're smarter, tougher, sneakier. But what they don't realize is that once you've seen someone's true face, they can never surprise you again. I already knew his next move. And this time, I wasn't just ready. I was waiting. The courtroom smelled like old paper and quiet desperation. I sat in the second row with Clara beside me, her sharp eyes skimming through David's lawsuit for the 3rd time. Across the room sat my son, dressed in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than his rent, pretending confidence, but I knew better. His foot tapped constantly. His eyes avoided mine. It had come to this, father and son on opposite sides of the law, not over inheritance or business, but over betrayal. I didn't want to be there. I never imagined I'd need to defend myself against my own blood. But when David filed for defamation, claiming I had deliberately orchestrated a smear campaign, I had no choice. He wanted a fight. Now he had it. The judge was an older woman, stern and efficient. She didn't tolerate theatrics, and I was grateful. This wasn't a drama. This was truth. David's attorney stood first. A slick man with too much gel in his hair and not enough soul in his eyes. He tried to paint David as the victim of a malicious elderly man who couldn't handle his own family's emotional complications. He called me bitter. Accused me of manipulating evidence. Claimed the videos were edited to seem worse than they were. When it was our turn, Clara stood with calm authority. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. We have raw footage, she said. No cuts. No edits. Audio recordings. Time-stamped. Verified by a third-party forensic analyst. My client did not manipulate anything. He merely revealed the truth. The judge nodded. Proceed. We played the footage again, this time in a legal setting. Eliza's voice filled the room. David's, too. The laughter. The planning. The indifference. The courtroom was silent. David didn't look up once. When the video ended, Clara handed the judge a printed transcript. For the record, she said. The judge flipped through it. This is substantial. David's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, Even if the content is authentic, this doesn't justify the public release. Mr. Bennett humiliated my client. Clara didn't miss a beat. If exposing the truth is humiliation, then perhaps Mr. Bennett should have been proud of his actions. He didn't defame his son. His son did that all by himself. The judge dismissed the court for a recess. In the hallway, David approached me for the first time in months. "You've turned everyone against me," he said. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger. "No," I said. "You did that the day you chose greed over your own father." He tried to smile. "You always were dramatic." I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "You think this is drama? I buried your mother with my own hands. I raised you when she walked out. I paid for everything. And when I needed you most, you plotted with my wife to put me in the ground." He didn't respond. I leaned in. "You don't deserve my name." Then I turned and walked back into the courtroom. An hour later, the judge returned with her decision. The courtroom was still, tense. "Mr. David Bennett's claim of defamation is hereby dismissed with prejudice," she said. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for further review regarding potential insurance fraud and conspiracy." David's face went blank. He didn't even stand up. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded at Clara. When it was over, I walked out into the cold air and breathed deeply. The sky was the color of steel, but it felt warm on my skin. I had won. But more than that, I had finished it. That evening, Sarah came over again. I told her everything. The courtroom. The decision. David's face when the judge read the verdict. She didn't cheer or cry. She just sat beside me and held my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I deserved that pride. That night, I sat in the workshop, alone. I opened the drawer where I kept David's old drawings from when he was a boy. Sketches of houses he wanted to build. Airplanes. A drawing of me and him fishing, stick figures with lopsided smiles. I stared at them for a long time. Then, slowly, I tore them up. Piece by piece. Some things you can't keep, even if they remind you of better days. Especially if they are built on lies. The snow came early that year. Light at first, just a dusting on the porch, on the old oak outside my window. But by morning, it covered everything. Pure. Unbroken. A clean white slate. I sat with my coffee in hand, wrapped in a heavy flannel, staring out at the quiet world. The storm inside me had finally calmed. No more courtrooms. No more cameras. No more letters. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ache. The papers came in the day before, the final notice from the court. David's case had been officially closed. No appeals. No further action. The district attorney had opened a preliminary investigation into the insurance fraud, and Elise had already received a formal summons. I had no doubt they'd both face consequences, but I didn't need to be part of that anymore. My part was done. I'd carried the weight long enough. It was time to let it drop. Sarah arrived that afternoon. She brought pie. Apple, with a little cinnamon, just like her grandmother used to make. "I figured you might be in the mood to celebrate," she said, stepping inside and shaking the snow from her boots. "I'm in the mood for quiet," I said with a smile. We ate in the kitchen, just the two of us. She told me about her classes, about a professor who made everyone cry with a story about trauma and survival. "I told him about you," she said quietly. "Not all the details. Just the strength part." I said nothing. Just reached across the table and took her hand. Later that evening, we sat by the fire. She asked if I would ever sell the house. No, I said. This is mine. I built it with my hands. Every beam. Every wall. Elise might have lived here, but she never owned it. You ever think about leaving? Sometimes. But then I think, maybe the best revenge is staying. Living well, right here, where they tried to bury me. She smiled. Living is the best revenge. Exactly. We sat in silence a while, the fire popping gently. Then she said, I think you're the strongest person I know. I looked at her, really looked. Not as my granddaughter, but as the last true thread connecting me to a family that once meant everything. I'm not strong, I said. I'm just stubborn. She laughed. Same thing sometimes. When she left that night, I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her car disappear into the snow. The wind howled, but the cold didn't bother me anymore. That was the last time I thought about Elise with anger. Later that week, I packed up everything that reminded me of her. The photos. The gifts. Even the wedding ring she gave me. I didn't throw them away. I buried them. Out in the woods behind the house, beneath a tall pine tree, I dug a hole and placed the box inside. Then I stood there a moment and whispered, You had your chance. I covered it back up and walked away. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept my journals. I pulled out a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote, New beginnings. Not because I planned on writing my life story. I wasn't that sentimental. But I needed to remind myself, life doesn't end just because someone tried to steal it. It starts over. The next morning, I got a call from the Veterans Hospital. The one that was receiving most of my estate. They wanted to name a new wing after me. I almost declined. Then I thought better of it. Let them put my name on something that heals, I told Clara when I called her later. Let my name mean something again. And finally, I went back to work. Not for money, not for recognition. But because building something with your own two hands is the best way to prove you're alive. I took on small projects, fixing benches, repairing sheds. Word spread. Old neighbors started showing up again. They brought wood, old tools, even food. Nobody asked about Elise or David. They just smiled and said, Good to see you back. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just survival. It was resurrection. I had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and grief. But I hadn't been destroyed. I had been reborn.